Vison Lang has announced, Caleb, that he will do what? Enter the transfer portal. Any destination yet? Not that I've seen.
No. Vysen Lang tweeted out yesterday. And for those who don't know, the transfer portal doesn't open until next week. So, we've talked a little bit about the work-life balance, but next week the college we'll be here on Monday, and the college football playoff matchups will be set, and the transfer portal opens. Yeah, great job, college football, with this calendar. Way to just screw me and Dave, who have just overwork us to death, and not just us, anybody who covers the sport. So, but he said he's going to enter the transfer portal. Vison Lang was an interior lineman who redshirted in 2023, and when he didn't redshirt, he actually saw like 4 snaps at center. That's where he got tested the most. And this year, as a reserve, he played 44 snaps at guard. So they tried him at center in 2023. Doesn't seem like it worked out. William Satterwhite was backing up Cooper Mays at center this year, to my understanding, and they were having Vison Lang play as a backup at guard, and he has entered the transfer portal. My read on this, and Dave, you know more than me, but I'll just start by saying my read on this is that Tennessee thinks they're going to get better interior linemen than him.
Let's remember this. They didn't turn to Vison Lang last year when Cooper Mays was hurt. Not that they should have, not that he was ready, but like a real transcendental player that you're like, oh man, he shows up and he's ready to play already. You would have stuck him in there, but he was not ready for that. And they had to go in a different direction with Dane Davis and Ollie Lane, who we love. But those guys have limited athletic ability. And I think they would say so as well, not compared to me and Caleb, but compared to other Division I athletes. So he wasn't ready to go last year. And then I was told that William Satterwhite, somewhere along the lines of late preseason camp, early in the season, had firmly taken a hold of that second string center position, which was very important if something were to happen to Cooper Mays, who was one of the 2 or 3 most important players on the team. At that point, I was like, it's just a matter of time until Vison Lang is gone. So I don't think there's any concern that Tennessee is going to suddenly start losing transfer portal guys. And honestly, I have complete faith in what Josh Heupel has done in the transfer portal, because if you look at the ones he's let go, a lot of defensive backs from last year. You can help me with some other names if you want to throw them in there. The kid at Kentucky, the kid at Arkansas.
Oh, you want me to name them? Gerald Mincy, Danico Slaughter, and then also Addison Nichols. Oh, right. You're talking about the offensive lineman. Yeah, Gerald Mincy and Addison Nichols specifically.
Right. Okay, so now I don't think that they necessarily wanted those 2 guys to walk, but at some point you've only got so much money to spend. But as a whole, in the transfer portal, I don't think they've lost anything that would cost them a game. I think they've lost some guys they'd rather have. Addison Nichols would be one. Mincy might be another. Might. I say might. They didn't miss any of those defensive backs, did they?
No, not at all. The defensive backs were upgraded dramatically.
Yeah, dramatically. So it seemed like, and I remember somebody asking me on a national show that I was doing one time, said they have a very inexperienced secondary. I'm like, well, kinda, but they played a lot and they wanted to replace those guys. So you can't use the old, they return 7 starters or they return 11 starters on both sides, so they're going to be fantastic. Guys, I watched Vison Lang, and I don't want to rip on the kid. Caleb, mute my mic if I'm too mean here. I watched him play when he committed. I didn't think he could play. I thought it was a guy that Tennessee took because at the time they needed bodies, and he was available. And again, I don't want to rip a kid, and I'm not just saying this because he's gone and it plays to our fan base to say that it's no big loss. But Caleb, it's no big loss.
This is where college football has changed dramatically, because what was the hardest thing about building a program back in the day, Dave?
Depth.
Yes. And what was the biggest dilemma you had as a coach?
You couldn't. Okay. I think this is where you're going. You got stuck with the guys because if you ran them off, even though you could, because they're on 1-year contracts, they sign a 5 on the flip side. But if you run these guys off, Caleb, you look really bad in recruiting. Is that kind of what you're driving at?
Yeah. So what I'm driving at is you can't just take a body for depth purposes. You couldn't do that back in the day. You had to weigh needing the depth now to try to build the program, and also where you think you're going to be recruiting in a couple of years. Because if you take one for depth purpose, say you're Lane Kiffin, it's 2009, you take a guy for depth purposes. In 2011, you're now competing for championships. You got that guy stuck on your roster for 2 years, and you can't replace him. He's a wasted scholarship, basically.
Yeah. And listen, if you're even one of those kids that you think you can show up to a school like UT or Ohio State, or I'm not just singling out UT, and you can develop for 3 years, you need to go somewhere else, because they're going to end up running you. I mean, you're not going to, and that used to happen. I can remember players that developed and blossomed as seniors, but that's just not an opportunity anymore.
No. And as a matter of fact, that's one of the reasons. I know you dislike him a lot and you think I love him, but which I don't, but one of the things that hurt Derek Dooley the most, Dave, was that Lane Kiffin, because he expected to get top 5 recruiting classes in the future, purposely did not take guys he could have taken that would have been maybe solid depth guys. And he was like, look, you're not going to play here. It's not worth it to waste the roster spot this year. Well, then when he leaves, he takes half his recruiting class with him, and then the depth is totally depleted because he purposely didn't go for depth that first year, thinking what he was going to do more beyond. So even you got to acknowledge that left Derek Dooley with a way more bare cupboard than most coaches get when they take over.
Well, and Lane did run some guys that didn't care about his recruiting reputation.
Yeah, he did.
Which is really, really rare. I mean, that you just don't get away with that. And maybe that would have undermined him in the future. I don't know. Maybe high school coaches would have said, you ran off Bobby Joe and I hate your guts now. Don't ever and this happens, or used to happen. Don't ever step foot in here again. But the bottom line is now you're a paid athlete.
I think the reason he would have been fine, he had a staff that probably had more recruiting credibility than any staff in America. I don't like it. I don't think Ed Orgeron's bright. Man, if I need a recruiter to coach defensive linemen, though, I mean,
I think he would have been fine, but perhaps he was a little too aggressive, a little too brash with some of those prospects, perhaps. But he did run some guys, and the kids need to know, if you're listening, hit like and subscribe, prospects, because you're not going to be able to show up to a school like Tennessee that expects to win a national championship and hang out for 3 years and develop and take advantage of all this that the universities offer, plus a little bit of cash in NIL, and just be like, oh, well, I'll wait until my senior year. I should be pretty good by then. Caleb, those days are over.
Oh, they are done. They are out. You might as well go play basketball for John Calipari and say you're going to wait till your senior year.
If you're not firmly, and when I say firmly, I mean firmly on the 2 deep. If you're not firmly on the 2 deep, where if somebody goes down, you're first man in, by the time you're a sophomore, you better be worried. You had better be worried. And I'm not so sure with Vison Lang's timing that Tennessee's coaches didn't already tell him that. Now, maybe I totally agree. Maybe that's dastardly. Maybe that's mean. But why would he put it out there early? Well, here's why. Because he needs to find a place to play, because he's not a high-level college football player. And that's the last thing I'm going to say about Vison Lang, because I feel like I'm being a jackwagon.
Well, that's why the whole pushing guys out, it helps in both ways. Because with the transfer portal, looks out for players' best interest a lot of times. They could go somewhere where they could play. Now, look, here's where the trick is that the rub is some players, Dave, and you know this, that know they're not NFL guys, they'd rather just collect that scholarship and be at Tennessee for 4 years and they're totally fine riding the bench. Is that fair to say? Because It's like, oh, I get to ride the bench, but I get to collect the scholarship and go to school at Tennessee and take advantage of all the perks of being a Division I football player at this level.